I'm Ashton Wood, and I've been in Kaspa since about 2023 heavily, and I've worn a few different hats during that time. I help Igra Labs with business development and some kind of ecosystem growth work. I also help lead the Kaspa Alliance for Transparency, more commonly in the community known as the CAT Foundation, if you guys are familiar. And I'm really excited to be back in Berlin. The CAT Foundation actually put on an event just under a year ago in Berlin over at Atelier Gardens, the Kaspa Experience. And it was the first time we've seen a live Kaspa economy in a dedicated conference, and it was a lot of fun. So very excited to be with you guys here. My talk today is really designed to kind of lay the groundwork and help us all understand exactly what Kaspa is today and how it came to be before our other speakers come on and tell us kind of what's next and what's coming for future development on Kas. So I guess to get started here, what is Kaspa? I know pretty much everyone in this room, I can assume, knows Bitcoin very well. Most of you also know Ethereum and Solana extremely well. Quick show of hands in our audience. Who feels really confident that they understand exactly what Kaspa is today? All right, it's about half of us, I guess. So a review for some of you and new information for others. So Kaspa is a proof of work layer 1 blockchain network. Proof of work means that we are mining real energy expenditure, real ASIC miners are out there. It is secured by the same setup as Bitcoin, Bitcoin grade security. There's no company, there's no approvers of miners, no one gets to decide who mines and secures the network, and there's no staking shortcuts that you can use to get around that energy expenditure. Kaspa also uses a BlockDAG architecture. So most blockchains that we're familiar with are simply a chain of blocks, right? They are linear with one block connecting to its parent and the preceding child. Kaspa doesn't use this single file chain. It uses a DAG, which is an acronym for a directed acyclic graph. In simple terms, it simply means that the network looks a lot more like branches on trees than it does a chain. Kaspa is also a UTXO-based network, so it inherits Bitcoin's soundest accounting principle that helps scalability, simplicity, and importantly, auditability. UTXOs are unspent transaction outputs that differ a bit from the account model that we see common in like Ethereum and Solana. Kaspa also uses BlockDAG consensus, and this means that it orders all parallel blocks into one agreed history. In simple terms, all honest miners are rewarded in Kaspa. And this is a direct contrast to Bitcoin, where we see a competition of creating blocks that can actually harm or penalize miners with higher latency connections or smaller miners that are geographically distributed. Because in Bitcoin, those blocks are orphaned and not rewarded to miners. Here in Kaspa, BlockDAG consensus actually orders all of those blocks, and every honest miner is rewarded for their contribution to the network. Kaspa also runs at 10 blocks per second right now. This means 3,000 transactions per second. The network targets about 100 milliseconds in between blocks. And this has been active on mainnet since May of last year, so a little over a year now, via the Crescendo upgrade, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the history section of the talk. This one is by far the nearest and dearest to my heart. I firmly believe that Kaspa is the ultimate settlement layer. It eliminates the need for centralized sequencers or approving parties that can either harm transaction flow or sequence or extract value from your network. An ultimate sequencing layer needs to be quick, and it needs to be able to confirm transactions that have arbitrary payloads, information that isn't exactly required for the Kaspa transaction, but is included so that it can have an effect elsewhere in the ecosystem. And Kaspa does a fantastic job of being this ultimate settlement layer. So what does it actually look like? You see here at the top of this slide a screenshot of the network from the KGI, which is the Kaspa Graph Inspector. This shows us live blocks and their relationships between parents and children on the Kaspa network. And as we can see, there are numerous parallel blocks being created, but we still find this strong blue line of confirmed safe history within this. So this is BlockDAG consensus at work. All of these parallel blocks were rewarded. The miners were given their Coinbase transaction for creating these, and the consensus ordered them in a way that ensured the chain history was secure and effective. So Kaspa is really important outside of the tech, I think, because it has a really strong, passionate community, and that comes from the fair launched and community run nature. So Kaspa was launched in November of 2021, and it was completely fair launched. The initial Genesis block holds an empty UTXO set that's actually verifiable by any one of us that wants to go in and run that script. And that means that no CAS existed in the Genesis block. There wasn't any on the network. There wasn't any to allocate to founders or insiders or early participants. As a matter of fact, every CAS in existence today had to be mined into existence. Kaspa is also completely open source and community run. The source code is available for you to audit yourself or to change and contribute to. Just in this last year, we've seen, I think, 2 or 3 new contributors to the Kaspa core code, and their names now live in the GitHub history of CAS, and it's really exciting. So again, no company owns the chain. Network is completely governed by the community contributors and predominantly miners, as they have to adopt any changes and agree to those. Large protocol decisions are typically issued via KIPs, very similar to like an EIP in Ethereum, if you're familiar. It stands for a Kaspa Improvement Proposal. And these are always debated in public and voted on by the Kaspa community before they are implemented. So as of today, Kaspa has processed over 2 billion transactions successfully in its history. And what's really exciting is I think when we look at 2 billion transactions, you may say, people are just sending CAS back and forth to themselves. And that's true. A lot of those transactions are Kaspa transfers. But because Kaspa serves as this ultimate sequencing layer, we have numerous other types of transactions that add into these 2 billion that have been processed. We have things like layer 2 networks that are embedding their state changes in Kaspa transactions as essentially based roll-up L2s. We have a sovereign, decentralized, and encrypted messaging system called Cassia that is using payloads on Kaspa to process transactions. And this list goes on. KFS is a Kaspa file system. KA-Chat is a mobile messaging system. And there's numerous others. So when you look at these 2 billion transactions, I encourage you to think of them as cars on a road. They are simply carrying data on the Kaspa network to miners for them to confirm and finalize, and your dApp, your application, your protocol can do anything you want it to with that data. Kaspa also has about 300 public nodes that are reachable via RPC. You can use them in your applications and development. You can connect to them in your wallet. Of course, there are hundreds more nodes on Kaspa that are private. People are running for themselves or in mining situations. But as of today, we see about 300 that are publicly available. Kaspa is also secured by about 400 petahash of mining hash rate. This is identical in pattern and in concept to how we look at Bitcoin security. And as a matter of fact, Kaspa is one of only 2 coins that is actively mined and held by a publicly traded company. Marathon Digital has been mining Kaspa for a couple years and does still hold it on its balance sheet. Another important thing that's not on our slide that I want to call out is that the community for Kaspa is extremely passionate and vocal and active. Kaspa consistently ranks in the top 1 or top few of the most bullish sentiment on CoinMarketCap. And that's a direct correlation to the individuals that are participating in this ecosystem and making sure their voice is heard. So at this point, we should have a good understanding of what Kaspa is today and at a high level, what it's capable of. But I want to take you guys through how this came to be. And I argue pretty strongly that building Kaspa started in 2013. It didn't launch until 2021, but my argument is that its development and research started in 2013. And the reason I say that is that Jonathan Sampolinski is somewhat of the founding mind of Kaspa, if you will. And in 2013, he was a PhD student at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and his PhD advisor was Aviv Zohar. And these two researchers posed a really innocuous question. They said, what happens to all the honest mining work that gets thrown away? And the answer to that question is in Bitcoin, when two miners are finding a block simultaneously, one of those is discarded. One of them wins and the other is thrown away. All of the energy used, all of the proportional capital expenditure to acquire that miner, and all the maintenance work that they put in is simply wasted. It's thrown away. And if we go back a handful of years, this became a very popular environmental topic in crypto of wasted energy in Bitcoin mining. Aviv and Jonathan published a paper accelerating Bitcoin's transaction processing. And I'm really a big fan of the subtitle, which is Fast Money Grows on Trees, Not Chains. And essentially what they broke down in this paper is that we don't have to have orphan blocks. We don't have to waste electricity and energy and capital expenditure to secure a network. What we can see here on the left is, in the middle, we can see this depiction of essentially a chain. And this is a depiction of what would be a linear chain, something like Bitcoin that doesn't allow orphans. And we can see that miner A and miner B were competing at that second block interval. And miner A won. They were rewarded, their block was kept, it was committed to the network history. Miner B was thrown away and they received nothing. Aviv and Jonathan suggested that GHOST is the answer to this problem. GHOST is an acronym that stands for the Greedy Heaviest Observed Subtree. And it enables us to essentially include a cumulative weight in consensus of all blocks, not just blocks that won or arrived first. So they put out this paper in 2013, and just a short year later, it was cited by Vitalik Buterin in the Ethereum white paper. He publishes the white paper in 2014 and cites Sampolinski and Zohar's Ghost paper pretty directly in this. Ethereum ends up adopting a simplified version of Ghost, the uncle mechanism that does reward near-miss miners. And it does help reduce centralization pressure at these higher block rates. But Ethereum's uncle mechanism wasn't good enough for Aviv and Jonathan, and their research continued. And that research thread essentially became Spectre and Phantom, and eventually BlockDAG powering Kaspa. Their goal there was to essentially handle all parallel blocks, not just the near-miss blocks that Ethereum's uncle mechanism had implemented. So their research continues from 2014, 2013 on to be honest, it continues today. But for the sake of this next milestone, it continues through about 2018, where they released the preprint of what would become Phantom BlockDAG. It's been revised a handful of times, and it is essentially a linearization algorithm that takes the DAG of parallel blocks and produces that blue line we saw on the visualizer before. It's that agreed upon ordering of the security of the network without any orphaning of honest miners' work. So they presented this paper in 2021 in September, at Advances in Financial Technologies conference in Arlington, Virginia. And just a few short months later, Kaspa mainnet was born. So if we look at kind of the research thread we've gone through so far, Ghost is ideated and the paper's released in 2013. In 2014, it's cited in Ethereum's white paper, and Ethereum ends up implementing the Uncle variant. 2015 to 2018, the Spectre and Phantom research continues. Something we did not discuss previously that is on here is that around the time of that Phantom Ghost DAG paper being released, DAG Labs was created, an R&D entity that was backed by Polychain Capital and designed specifically to turn these papers into code, actually launch the project. And then we move on to them presenting Phantom Ghost DAG in 2021 and Kaspa mainnet being born just a few short months later. So when we look at Kaspa's launch, November 7th, 2021, a day we should all remember. There's three, I think, really important things that matter about this launch. One is that there's no ICO, there's no pre-sale. No tokens were sold to raise funds. There was no venture capitalist involved or investors that needed their desires to be worried about by the team. There was also no pre-mine. We do see sometimes proof of work networks discuss the fact that they have no ICO and there's no pre-sale, but they've still allocated a portion of tokens outside of the emission schedule so that they can give these to investors or founders or whatever interested parties there are. Kaspa was entirely mined in the open. So when we look at the timeline of this, DAG Labs was dissolved before Kaspa launched. We see all of the CPU miner software available in the Kaspa Discord, which was public before the launch or on day one. So everyone had an extremely fair shake at getting involved in the Kaspa network. And this is really important because crypto has become a pay-to-play environment. And we've moved away from a lot of our roots of Bitcoin, of the cypherpunk, decentralized, sovereign nature of things. And a fair launch network allows you to know indefinitely that there are no special people's concerns that get extra credit, right? There's no changes being made to the network to please an investor or to ensure that the stockholders are making a return. Everything done in Kaspa is specifically for the benefit of the network, the community, and the tech itself. So if we continue on the story of Kas, about a year, little less than a year after Kaspa launches, Michael Sutton, one of the core developers, authors KIP 1. And it's, again, Kaspa Improvement Proposal 1. And it's a large task. It's a huge endeavor for KIP 1. It is a full rewrite of the entire Kaspa node software in Rust. The reason he wrote this is the original Go implementation had a technical ceiling. We knew we wanted to move to block rates that Golang just couldn't handle from a programming language perspective. KIP 1 is discussed in public. It's voted on by the Kaspa community in the Discord. And it's actually funded directly by Caspians themselves. So 100 million Kaspa was granted from the community to execute KIP 1 and to finance the rewrite in Rust. It was implemented. It's the reference node that's in use today as Rusty Kaspa. And it really drove three goals: raw performance, the actual throughput, and manageability, right? The blocks per second we discussed before. It also introduced modular architecture, which makes managing, integrating, updating, and maintaining the software easier and more fluid for the team in the future. And the last goal here is really important because it shows the team had a lot of foresight in thinking about moving Kaspa forward. One of the core goals here was the clear engineering path to the block rates that we now have today that Golang couldn't have handled, the old node version software. So KIP1 is a huge success, I believe, in Kaspa. And it's necessary because we are operating a BlockDAG, and we are looking for high blocks per second. And we do not want to give up on the decentralization or the sovereignty of that network in the process. And most linear blockchains face a hidden or secret centralization trap. The faster you make a linear chain like Bitcoin, the worse your orphan rate gets. The orphan rates of blocks are actually directly related to the financial power of the miner themselves. It's about low latency connections. So if you don't have the wealth and resources to put yourself next to a data center, your miners next to a data center that's running the node, you will have higher latency and you will be affected by these orphan blocks receiving less rewards. Similarly, small pools and small miners have this same effect. So when you look at like Bitcoin, at a block per second, Bitcoin's orphan rate would be manageable. It's not outlandish, but when you get to 10 blocks per second, a linear chain, the orphan rates explode, and small miners fall behind, big pools become dominant, and you've actually used speed to kill decentralization in a linear chain. Kaspa's BlockDAG obviously solves this because all of these parallel blocks are kept. There are no orphans. Every miner's work counts towards security, and a small miner at 10 blocks per second has the exact same proportional security contribution as a large pool. The entire topology stays honest because of the BlockDAG consensus, or the BlockDAG architecture, excuse me. Proportional security is quite interesting. I actually learned something prepping this, but GhostDAG actually weights all honest mining. So a miner with 1% of hash rate contributes exactly 1% to network security. There's no orphan penalty for being small or geographically distant. Again, bringing back the complete fairness and open availability of the ecosystem. Now, we've talked a lot about tech and the network and how we've built it, but I want to talk a little bit about demand, because we can build the coolest, sharpest gear in the world, but if no one wants to use it, it doesn't matter much. The first instance of demand arrived in 2024, actually before any major network upgrades. This was KRC-20. So KRC-20 is an indexer protocol developed by a third party called Kasplex. They are not L1 native smart contracts or programmability, but they did bring inscription-style token creation to Kaspa, and the takeoff of this KRC-20 movement was huge. They initially launched a public beta in June of 24, and then moved to mainnet in September of 24. In that first day, we saw 13 million transactions. We saw 80,000 unique addresses participating in KRC-20, minting, deploying, trading, whatever it was. And this all equated to 400x, in the baseline volume of Kaspa transactions. It also equated to about 21 million in Kaspa going to miners, increasing the security budget and incentivizing them to mine as a KRC-20 fees. So 156 tokens deployed in 24 hours on KRC-20. What does it tell us? What does it prove? I think it proves that latent demand has existed in Kaspa for a very long time, and it continues to exist today. It isn't directly related to network capacity or future network upgrades. It's a community of people who want to spend more time in Kaspa doing things, trading, learning, growing, sharing, minting, burning, and so on and so forth. So if we get back on track with our focus on Kaspa tech and how it's evolved, our next big milestone is Crescendo, which was fairly recently, May 5th of last year. So Crescendo is a hard fork. It is also known as KIP14. And it is actually authored also by Michael Sutton, same as KIP1, the Rust rewrite. So when we look at this, we've got 3 years, a single engineering arc, and it's all delivered. Crescendo upgraded the block rate of Kaspa. We went from 1 block per second that we were at when we launched to now 10 blocks per second. This means that we had a 10x increase in transaction throughput as well, from 300 to 3,000 transactions per second. What's interesting to note, or I think intellectually stimulating about this, is that we don't actually see 10 blocks created at the exact same time on a 1 second interval. We see 100 milliseconds between blocks. And this means that your transaction, your transfer, your DeFi contract call, all of this can happen in the blink of an eye on Kaspa in 100 milliseconds. The release of Crescendo was officially Rusty Kaspa version 1. And it was the reference node that we were all using, and some of us are still using, up until about 2 weeks ago. And now we have more to talk about on this front. And on that note, it's not for me to talk about. So I hope that I gave you a good understanding and baseline of where Kas is today and kind of how it came to be. We're going to hear from 2 other speakers today. First one coming up is Pavel, the CEO of Igra Labs. Igra is an EVM-compatible L2 that operates as a base rollup on Kaspa and launched in March of this year. So he'll take us through a lot more detail about that. But I mention it because I encourage you to think of Igra as your portal to Kaspa with the Solidity and EVM stack. If you're a developer that knows Solidity, if you feel more comfortable with the EVM stack than a novel stack, you can actually inherit all the benefits of Kaspa. The proof of work security, the architectural resistance to MEV and front running and sandwich attacks and things like this. So as we proceed through these talks today, I would encourage you to think of Pavel and Igra's talk as kind of the EVM and Solidity doorway to Kaspa. We'll also hear from Alex later today, and he's going to take us through a workshop on Takata, which is the next hard fork for Kas. This brings ZK verification opcode availability. It brings Silverscript, which is a kind of SDK for building. And it's actually an amalgamation of a number of KIPs that I'm sure he'll take us through. So in closing, when we look at Kas, I mean, it really did start in 2013, I think. They started with Ghost Research. Vitalik used it in 2014 in Ethereum. We saw the research continue and eventually lead to Phantom BlockDAG in the launch of Kas. We saw the Rust rewrite start in 2022. A very large KRC-20 launch in 24 that proved demand for this ecosystem. We upgraded to 10 blocks per second in 2025. Igra launched as a based rollup in March of this year, and Takata is just a few days away. So I appreciate you guys being here and participating in the ecosystem and listening to me, and I hope it helps.